everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely pumped to guide you through this explainer today because we're about to completely transform how you integrate the Gemini CLI into your everyday coding workflows. Now, if you've been working with AI coding assistants, you already know the drill, right? They can write code, they sniff out bugs, they help you add features. But there is a hidden layer of mastery here that takes your AI from being just a handy little tool to a fully integrated, knowledgeable coding partner. Today, we're looking at one specific file, the GEMINI.md file. We're going to unpack exactly how you can use this file to instruct your AI on your specific project conventions, your architecture, and your personal coding preferences, ensuring it works exactly the way you want it to.
But before we dive into the solution, we've got to talk about the problem. Have you ever asked an AI to generate a component for you, and what you get back is technically functional, but stylistically, it's just a total mess? You know what I mean. Maybe it's completely bloated with inline classes you'd literally never use, or it's throwing semicolons everywhere when your entire codebase is strictly semicolon-free. It is so incredibly frustrating. You end up spending way more time just correcting the AI's formatting choices than you would have spent just writing the darn code yourself in the first place. It creates so much friction. Basically, your AI is just guessing how you like things done, and honestly, it usually guesses wrong.
Well, that is exactly where our solution comes in. Think of the Gemini.md file as a highly specific employee handbook for your brand new AI developer. It's your ultimate context provider. Without this file, the Gemini AI model is essentially flying blind, just making generic assumptions about how your code should look. But with this file, all of its contents are automatically scooped up and added to your CLI session as additional context. It knows your rules, it knows your libraries, it knows exactly how you code. It completely stops guessing and starts executing your actual vision. So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the AI context advantage. Second, initializing your Gemini file. Third, mastering the auto-accept workflow. Fourth, setting your coding preferences. Fifth, structuring your context hierarchy. And finally, number 6, refreshing your AI's memory. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive right into section 1, the AI context advantage. Stop guessing, start directing.
So when you bring Gemini into an existing project, you don't even have to write this handbook from scratch. The AI is actually remarkably perceptive. Gemini will actively search through your existing codebase. It acts kind of like a detective, really, looking for patterns. It'll figure out what framework you're using, like noticing, oh, hey, you have a Nux 3 web application. It'll identify if you're using a testing framework, like Vitest. It figures out where your CSS libraries live, like spotting your single main.css file. It even looks at how your app is structured, realizing your view components are in an app/components folder while your pages are routed somewhere else. It even figures out the general premise of the app, like identifying a platform for users to share food combinations, and it neatly summarizes all of that data to automatically write its own initial instructions.
Which brings us to section 2, initializing your Gemini file, the setup process.
The entire setup process kicks off with just a single / command in your chat window. Step 1, you just type /init. That's a special command telling the Gemini CLI to go ahead and scan the codebase. Step 2 is actually pretty fascinating. Right away, before it even looks at your project, it creates an empty Gemini.md file right there in the root of your project. Then, step 3, it does that deep analysis of the codebase we just talked about, reading a bunch of files to draft its summary. But notice what happens in step 4? It doesn't just aggressively overwrite your files. No way. It shows you a diff, a clear comparison of what it wants to write, and it explicitly asks for your permission in the chat window before actually saving any of that content. All right, moving to section 3, mastering the auto-accept workflow, reducing friction. Now, by default, the Gemini CLI is highly cautious. It asks for permission for literally every single file change or command it wants to run. Now, you do get options to allow once, always allow for the session, or completely refuse and suggest changes. But if you want a truly seamless experience, you're going to want the optimized workflow. When you select that auto-accept option, a little message pops up above your chat input saying accepting edits. This means Gemini will just automatically make code changes without constantly nagging you. And honestly, here's a massive pro tip. You can quickly toggle this auto-accept state on and off simply by hitting Shift+Tab on your keyboard. It's a real game changer for staying in the flow. Let's jump to section 4, setting your coding preferences, getting specific. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer level of control you have. The initial scan gives the AI the big picture, the frameworks, the basic structure, but you can scroll right down to the bottom of that Gemini.md file and just type in plain English exactly what you expect. For example, you can explicitly say, do not use semicolons for JavaScript and TypeScript. You can tell it to keep components small and modular. You can give it highly specific architectural instructions, like telling it not to pollute your template files with endless Tailwind classes, but instead to just sprinkle a few where needed and put custom classes in your main.css file. You can enforce relative imports instead of path aliases, keep dependencies minimal. Whatever your personal or team conventions are, the whole shebang goes right here, and the AI model actually uses them to make decisions about how to generate your code.
Up next, Section 5, Structuring Your Context Hierarchy, Scaling Your Instructions.
Okay, so it gets even cooler, because there are actually 3 distinct levels where you can place a GEMINI.md file to build a really robust set of rules across your entire setup. At the project-wide level, which we just covered, the file lives right in the root directory and applies to that specific app. But you can get way more granular. You can drop a file into a subdirectory. So, for example, if you want Gemini to follow completely different rules when it's writing tests, you just drop a specific Gemini.md file right inside the /test folder. But wait, there is also a global level. In your home directory on a Mac or your user profile directory on Windows, there is a hidden .gemini folder. If you create a Gemini.md file in there, those instructions will span across every single project you ever build with the Gemini CLI. That is exactly where you want to stash your universal, absolute, non-negotiable coding style preferences.
Finally, Section 6, Refreshing Your AI's Memory, Maintenance and Future-Proofing.
So, here is a crucial pitfall you need to avoid. The CLI doesn't magically know the very second you edit one of these markdown files or drop a new one into a subdirectory. There is one critical step you absolutely must take: the command /memory, followed by the subcommand refresh. Running this forces the Gemini CLI to actively go out and rescan your entire project for any modified or new Gemini files. Once it finishes, it'll spit out a message confirming memory was refreshed, and it will explicitly tell you exactly how many Gemini.md files it's currently using for its context. Always, always run this command after you tweaked your instructions. And that leads us directly to this incredibly important warning straight from our source material today. Continually update your Gemini file. Otherwise, the AI model will be using stale information about your project. This file is definitely not something you just create on day one and then forget about forever. As your application grows, as you maybe pull in different services, or as your team's architectural preferences shift over time, this manual absolutely has to evolve. Because if it doesn't, your AI partner is going to start handing you outdated solutions based on how your app looked 6 months ago. You have to treat it as a living document. We have covered a lot of ground: the initialization, that smooth auto-accept workflow, customizing your exact preferences, building a rock-solid file hierarchy, and keeping the AI's memory totally fresh. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought. As your application grows, what rules will you write to keep your AI copilot on track? The power to stop the code bloat and dictate exactly how your code is generated is literally in your hands right now. Go create that Gemini.md file, write out your absolute ideal coding standards, and experience a massive upgrade in how you and your AI build things together. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy coding!